Well, welcome everybody. This is very exciting, and I think you know that today is the anniversary of the election. So we are reflecting always on what we've been able to do in a year, but all the work we've got to do going forward. And so I'm honored to be here today with some of my parliamentary colleagues and Larry Bagnall, who chairs the Stand Up Larry, the Arctic Parliamentarians Group, and MP Maguire, who also from Manitoba, my fearless Inuit Parliamentary Secretary Yvonne Jones, who leads us always in good ways. As a former fisheries minister from Newfoundland and Labrador, she has lots to teach me on areas that I have lots to learn. Charlie Watt, the senator from Nunavik, and of course our wonderful leaders, Bobby Joe Greenland from the Gwich'in territory, and the amazing Inuit leader from Iqaluit, Madali Okalik, but you'll get to be treated to that shortly. So thank you, merci, Miigwech, Kuyanomik, Nakumik, Marsi, Masi Cho. Thank you, Ambassador Kunix, for your welcome and for bringing all of your partners here to the traditional territory of the Algonquin people, with whom we signed a historic agreement yesterday towards a final agreement in terms of dealing with this issue here in Canada, which is that we are all here on native land, as our national anthem sort of says. Je suis très heureuse de vous présenter au sujet de l'Arctique contemporain et des occasions remarquables qui se profitent à l'horizon. It is interesting to hear about the trip that the ambassadors took to the Arctic, because I think that from one's first trip to the Arctic, you are hooked forever. And I'm just so impressed with the itinerary that you had, and that from Nunatsiavut and to Cape Dorset, to Resolute, to hear the stories of the relocatees, people that were moved as Northerners to some place that didn't work for them at all, and the PTSD that happens, to all of the beauty that surrounds us, and as you said, my beautiful land. And I think that from my very first trip as a brand new member of Parliament in 1998, we formed an Arctic caucus, because we felt that Nancy Karatek-Lindell, as one member of Parliament for a fifth of the country, needed the support of much more of us to understand the challenges of the North, and to support the kind of work that needed to be done in terms of Northern policy. But as you found out, that it not only was the majesty of the land, but the dignity of the people, and the understanding that the people had for their responsibility to the land. And I think in future visits, I think I've been back every year since then, but understanding that it's not just the land. It is the land and the water and the ice, that is, as marine people, that we have to make sure that as we develop Northern policies, that this isn't only about the land. It is about the water and the ice, and a way of life that is at risk at these times. So It is again, across Canada and across all of our governments, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous governments, that we agree that the future of Canada's North has to be based on self-determination and self-reliance for Northerners. And this is, as you know, supported by land claims, self-government, and devolution. And in fact, in the work that we are doing now in Cabinet in the South, that often we look to the land claim agreement in the North and the ability to co-manage tough questions is again viewed as an example of how we need to be going when we talk about self-determination, self-government, about how we will make decisions together as true partners, in that, as the Prime Minister has said in the mandate letter of every minister, that changing this relationship is about a recognition of rights, respect, cooperation, and partnership. And that's in the mandate of every minister in our government. And that is, no one expects that to be easy. But it's good when we have examples of things that are working, like the planning boards and the ways of sharing tough decisions as we do right now in the North. It is again the just serious recognition that the opportunities in the North must be shaped by Northerners. In particular, the Indigenous people who have always lived there. And today, the Indigenous people of the Arctic, together with the descendants and recent arrivals from elsewhere that we lovingly refer to as settlers, of which I am one, are forging relationships and creating opportunities for the communities across the Canadian Arctic. We know that even in International Polar Year, that a lot of the decisions were made in the South, that didn't sit right, and that we have to do much better at actually organizing and formalizing the voices of the North to be able to make decisions with respect to the North. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Includes Arctic research. It includes the kinds of things that Northerners want, know the tough questions that need to be answered with scholarly approaches in terms of research. So we do believe that this vision for the North, led by Northerners, is relevant for other regions in the world as well. Cela nous rappelle la nécessité de travailler ensemble en étroite collaboration. Canada and many of our European Union partners in the Arctic share a long history of multilateralism. And while collaborating in the North, Canada and its European Union partners have worked hard to respect the values of pluralism and internationalism. And I must say that even share some of the tougher chapters, as at the Toronto International Film Centre Film Festival this fall, to see the film Sami Blood, a powerful Swedish film about their history in residential schools, and that we have to talk about these tough chapters together as well, as we are all moving to this joint vision of reconciliation. We believe that the EU's recent integrated policy for the Arctic signals those same values. We believe your policy is an eloquent expression of our collective conviction that the Arctic is about the people who live there. That's our value of pluralism in action, the belief that those who live there must be allowed to thrive there with their distinct cultural identities intact. We know that secure personal cultural identity is the absolute key to good health choices, educational outcomes, economic outcomes. Without being proud of who you are, being able to actually know that with self-esteem that this is a fantastic thing to be a proud Inuit woman or a Gwich'in man. This is really, really important as we look to what we were talking about at the coffee in terms of the difference between health and health care. What we've learned about from Indigenous ways about the importance of keeping people well, not just patching them up when they get sick, that it's too expensive to run a repair shop in the North. We want people to stay well, and that starts with this secure personal cultural identity, and it means that it is about keeping those identities intact and us admitting the folly of residential schools, the folly of thinking that we would make everybody more like us in the South is really, really bad policy, and for which we are still paying. As Commissioner Vella said, our approach to the Arctic has to be about full respect of the livelihoods of those who live in the region. And of course, we couldn't agree more. Northern Canadians, particularly the Indigenous people of the Arctic, hold deep, tangible connections to the land, to its history and its promise. And again, we have to add that includes the water and the ice. My colleague, Stéphane Dion, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, shares that belief. And I know he's committed to making sure Canada is a leading advocate for international cooperation, advancing the sustainable development of the Arctic region in partnership with Arctic states and with Northerners. So as our countries celebrate the 40th anniversary of the partnership, we need to come together like never before with a renewed focus on the people of the North. Je suis très heureuse de constater que le programme d'aujourd'hui met l'accent sur cette question. So, since my first trip to the North in 1998, which was so exhilarating, I think that in subsequent trips that we become very aware of the challenges. There's one day that I'll never forget in Igloolik, as the Inuit leaders were looking to the map and looking to the waters and saying, this was abundance. This is how we fed our families. This was our livelihood. And that to put that in stark contrast to people lining up at a food bank or at a soup kitchen in terms of hungry kids, that when we look at a study where 70% of kids in Nunavut are food insecure as they go to school, that this just doesn't seem right. And but also I remember one of my trips to the north to Cambridge Bay and Joe Haven, the very first year that the Northwest Passage had allowed the navigation of ships to realize that nobody up there was ready to have the Land's End yacht pull up to the dock or a steel sailing ship arrive from Ireland with fiddlers on the front deck. That this was just again something that people knew was the future. And the understanding that how do we get ready for this in terms of the potential of tourism, the potential of people wanting to come and see this. And I must say to the ambassador from Iceland that we are very jealous of what you have been able to do in terms of taking a pristine environmental approach to ecotourism and be able to take a population, I think, of 300,000 people to 2 million tourists a year that is done in a way that is in keeping with environmental priorities, and this is obviously hugely exciting as we listen to the hope for places like Tuktoyaktuk, the places like Cambridge Bay, places like Churchill. This is where we know we've got to go. But as we met with the Northern ministers last month to realize that what is now called economic leakage means that if all the environmental activity or economic activity in the north leaks to companies from the south and nothing stays in the north, that again is not going to meet our objective of actually sustaining a livelihood for northerners who deserve the right to benefit from economic activity in the North, that it actually has to benefit Northerners. So it is un univers fascinant. Lors de cette voyage, j'ai discuté avec des personnes qui vivent de la terre, mais aussi peuples de la mer, la glace, dans divers petits hameaux et collectivités. I think that there's nobody that can have learned anything about the North without just feeling that there is resilience. This was a way of life, and I remember once in the elders center in Iqaluit asking the elders, how come you're called elders and in the South we call people elderly? And they said, well, it's because we were the survivors. It was a tough life, and we were able to survive, and therefore we're respected. And I think that, again, there's so many things that we can learn, but I for sure want to grow up to be an elder, not elderly. And I hope that we can, keep learning. It was, I remember in meeting leaders like Nellie Cornway, the first woman premier of a Canadian territory and strong Indigenous leader who like the Inuit across the Inuit Nunangat, catches fish from the sea and geese on the lands. And I was pretty impressed this summer as she was serving me whitefish in her home in Inuvik, that she had caught it the day before in her home in Tuktoyaktuk. By having she has sort of a clothesline with a fishnet on it that she just wheels out into the river, catches the fish, and then wheels it back. I mean, she doesn't even have to get her feet wet. This is pretty important and pretty delicious in terms of what that experience is for me. And I don't think you should have to be an MP or a minister to be able to have that kind of experience in the North. It is I remember when we were opening the 17th, I think, e-health video conferencing center in Nunavut, and being reminded that was 17 e-health conference centers, but there were 17 people living in the house next door. I remember just thinking that those two numbers just didn't work, that you would have that kind of technology, but that kind of problem in terms of when we look at what the rates of tuberculosis or suicide or all of the things that actually come from that kind of overcrowding that just makes no sense at all, and that we can and must do better. It is astounding that when the parliamentary secretary Yvonne Jones and I were in Nunatsiavut to actually hear of decisions that had been made for housing that was actually built in Florida and shipped up as inexpensive, and you go, well, it's not going to work, and so let's stop doing that. I mean, it is the definition of insanity to keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. We have got to learn, and that's why we have to listen to Northerners about what will work. Our Senate committee on housing was just astounded to see that so many of the houses that we have the government of Canada pay for have no vestibule in them. Every time the door opens, all the cold air goes straight into the whole house, and then you wonder why you've got condensation. This isn't hard, but it shows that we've not been listening, and that is the shared vision of how we go forward, listening to Northerners. It is again the issue around nutritious food and how shipping huge planes full of southern food up north, which is bad for climate change, but it's also bad for nutrition, and it is fostering diabetes, and when you look to what was a traditional diet, we actually have to do better. And as we're looking to change programs like Nutrition North, we are hearing coast to coast to coast in terms of the North, how it's going to have some basis in country food. We have got to do something to help the harvesters be able to adapt to the realities of climate change, that some of what they were hunting is way further away, that the kinds of things that when the gas prices were terrible, not being able to fuel their snow machines or their boats, that these are things that we need to listen to what the policy they want is, as opposed to making lists of food we think that they should eat, and then just disappointing again. So it is as we see the impacts of climate change, and that's putting such a stress on northern resource. And I was saying just before that for us to be able to paint the picture of going down that ladder in the community freezer in Tuktoyaktuk, and that was over 10 years ago, and for the elder to be explaining that this community freezer in the permafrost, that there is now water running down the wall. You can't deny climate change if this freezer supposedly in the permafrost has water running down the wall. This is hugely important that we listen to Northerners about how their lives are changing, and what can we do to get to actually mitigate these changes, but also be able to look to some of the opportunities that are coming that need to be again led by Northerners. So it is, again, I cannot emphasize it enough, the increasing focus on self-determination and self-reliance in Canada's North. As you know, most of Canada's Arctic is now covered by modern treaty arrangements that recognize Indigenous governments and the integral role of Indigenous people in the North. This summer, we celebrated another milestone with the Gaultier government and the government of Northwest Territories coming into force of the Delaunay final self-government agreement. And again, this is the issue of unique nation-to-nation agreement, the start of a new relationship and another step in the journey of reconciliation and renewing what is the crown to Inuit relationship is going to be really important. L'établissement de relations entre les nouveaux partenaires offre des occasions de choix à tous les habitants du Nord. It also includes working with our neighbors, and that's why we are a founding member of the Arctic Council, which is marking its 20th anniversary and of the Ottawa Declaration. It's really important that next year we celebrate 30 years of the Inuit Circumpolar Council, which has grown into the major Inuit international organization representing nearly 160,000 Inuit in the Arctic. And my friend Nancy Caratal-Lindell, who was elected on the same day I was in 1997, is now the Canadian president for Canada for the Circumpolar Council. So it is having to learn and adapt to change as quickly as Arctic populations have. We have to learn to manage and resolve the competing interests that your conference is about today in terms of the economic opportunities, but also protecting the land and the water and the ice. It is why the Prime Minister took every provincial premier, but also the Indigenous leaders to the UN Summit on Climate Change and brought Arctic voices to those negotiations as part of the official delegation that included the Indigenous political leaders. We know that Inuit and Indigenous people want to be, they want to be part of the solutions. They are the on the actual front line of the problems. They want to be part of the solution. So getting off diesel is hugely important to them, and exploring the kinds of alternative energy that is possible. But they also want to make sure that in environmental investments and assessments, and that they are a true partner in how that works. It was. You will hear from Natalie shortly, but I want to just tell you that listening to Inuit youth is one of the most inspiring things that is part of my job. That they get it, they're on the ground with their people, they listen, and then they report back in a very accurate way. They want language and culture and competency on the land and the water. They want something done about the level of education and the quality of education that they are getting in the North. They want to understand the issue of suicide, and we are very grateful that with Natalie's help that ITK has launched a very impressive, comprehensive suicide prevention, that it actually has to be developed bottom up. So it was exciting that Prime Minister Trudeau and President Obama committed to the shared Arctic leadership model, and I am so proud that we have been able to appoint Mary Simon, who you all know as my ministerial special representative, to actually get to work on defining what that Arctic leadership should look like for Canada. And also, I'm so excited that she is tomorrow doing e-consultation with the help of Cisco with the Inuit youth as she prepares her preliminary report for the end of this month. So it is I think what's been happening in Canada over the last decades to build this strong sense of the importance of Canada's North. We do have a pluralistic, multilateral, inclusive agenda to guide our country in the matters of the Arctic domestically and internationally. And I believe we do have a blueprint to guide us through this period of accelerated and transformative change. You will see in the mandate letters of many of the ministers that collaborating with the government on an Arctic agenda is something that we will do as ministers, but we know we cannot do it as ministers without listening to Northerners. That this is going to be and we want all of the ministers to actually be able to feel what it is to be in the North, but to listen to Northerners. It is again about harvesting solutions from the people who live there and know. So it is again, whether it's housing or the Nutrition North changes that will have to come, or suicide prevention, or R&D. We are hoping when we launch the new Canadian High Arctic Research Station which will be operational next year, that we will attract research from across Canada's North, but it is also that the focus needs to be also about the people. That's what we're hearing about housing, about nutrition, about medical care. How do we make sure that it is that approaches to northern approaches to climate change will be inspired by the Arctic Council's people-centered and inclusive approach. So it is an exciting time in terms of the creation of a new Arctic policy framework that will be developed in true partnership. So it is this spirit of collaboration reflected in how closely linked Indigenous people and their governments and all around the circumpolar region, including in the EU countries. They are already protecting rights, advocating for interests, strengthening bonds internationally, and partnering with countries to safeguard a way of life. And I think that here we are very grateful for the Inuit exclusion on the seal. This is the exemption. This has been hugely important as we travel coast to coast to coast in terms of Inuit way of life. So it is that Northerners from so many of your countries, Ambassador, now have a strong international voice advocating everything from the mental wellness to the fishery to the promotion of Indigenous languages. This is about shared leadership, but it goes a long way in reconciliation at its core. So we are working hard. We believe that this is genuine in terms of our commitment to renew the relationship between Canada and the Indigenous people, and therefore moving forward in a good way. Last night at the concert, Gord Downey, who now has become really in his last in his sort of terminal phase of his cancer, has really put reconciliation at on the map for Canada in a way that hasn't happened before. And so I think that it is a matter of us listening to that. We have to have learned a lot as we begin to celebrate 150 years since Confederation next year. We have to admit that what we've learned over the last 150 years, we have to put into action in the next 150 years, and we've got to get going now. We made terrible mistakes, and that for which we are paying, and it's going to be really important that the relationship with Indigenous people can feel like a true partnership, and I think that again, I think is one of the goals of the EU and EU Arctic states, and making sure that the values that we share are intact and that we focus on the people. So it is a truly exciting time. I think that we want to focus on what is working. I think that we are grateful for your support in the Northern Contaminants Program. We want to make sure that, again, Inuit Northern voices are heard. I think that the Stockholm Convention on POPs and the Minamata Convention on Mercury, we have got to do this, but we've got to turn this around. It's just not okay to tell people they can't eat what they've eaten all their lives. We've got to fix this, and it is going to be by reaching out and redoubling our effort to listen to Northerners. The facts may be maybe a little bit less, but when the ambassadors have said how impressive that trip north was, but we in Canada have to continually remind ourselves that if 90% of Canadians live within 100 miles of the American border, or almost that amount, we've got this big, huge country with very few people in a lot of it, and we have to listen to those people. And we are going to make big mistakes if we listen to the people, if people in the South are allowed to make policy in the North without listening to Northerners and in a true partnership. So it is, I think, again, you'll be so impressed when you hear Madeleine in terms of what actually is the focus of someone passionate about the future. And I think as we know, and I think what we're trying to do in all relationships with Indigenous peoples is we have to listen to the youth. As the Prime Minister says, the youth aren't our future, they're our present. They actually have the ability, and they know what's going on, and they want to help us fix it. And if we just pat them on the head and say, well, someday you'll be the leader, they're the leaders now. And I think that this is going to be a very exciting time as at the next meeting of the Aboriginal ministers across Canada, we have all pledged next year that we will bring youth with us to that meeting to make sure that we will get the present right as we look forward to them and our shared future when I'm an elder. So we just want to thank you for all of the Arctic states for making engagement with Indigenous and Northerners central to all we do together, and we thank you for being such an amazing partner for Canada, for the Arctic, and for the future of its resilient and strong people. Thank you. Merci. Miigwech. Kuyanamik. Nakumik.